A 6-year-old boy stood in the middle of a dark highway, frantically waving a red emergency flare at 30 approaching motorcycles. And what he said when they stopped made these hardened bikers cry. Before we dive into the story, make sure to smash subscribe, because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The roar of 30 Harley-Davidson engines shook the ground as the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club thundered down Highway 49 at midnight. They were returning from a 3-day memorial run to honor their fallen brother Tank, who had died in Afghanistan saving 3 members of his squad. These weren't just bikers. They were veterans, mechanics, fathers, and men who had seen the worst of humanity and survived. Some had Purple Hearts, others had scars both visible and hidden, but nothing in their combined centuries of experience could have prepared them for what they were about to encounter on that empty stretch of road. Marcus, the club president and former Army Ranger, saw it first through the darkness. A tiny figure standing directly in the middle of the highway, waving something bright red above his head. At 70 miles per hour in the pitch-black night, it looked like a ghost or a hallucination. Marcus raised his fist, the universal signal to stop, and 30 motorcycles began slowing down in perfect formation, their pipes echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. "What the hell is that?" Razor shouted over the dying engines, his voice carrying the confusion they all felt. As their headlights converged on the figure like spotlights on a stage, they realized it was a child. A boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon dinosaurs, standing barefoot on the cold asphalt. His small feet were planted firmly on the yellow center line as if he belonged there. In his tiny hands, he held a road emergency flare that was almost as tall as he was, waving it desperately above his head like his life depended on it. Marcus was off his bike before it fully stopped, his boots hitting the pavement hard. The other bikers formed a protective circle, their headlights creating a wall of blinding light around the child. The boy's face was streaked with tears and dirt, his feet were bleeding from running on the rough road, and his whole body was shaking, but not from the cold desert air. "Please help," the boy gasped, his voice barely a whisper that somehow cut through the rumbling engines. "They took my sister. The bad men took Emma, and they're going to sell her." Those words hit the bikers like a physical blow to the chest. Several of them had daughters. All of them understood what this meant. The temperature among the group dropped to sub-zero despite the warm night. Marcus knelt down to the boy's level, his 6'4" frame making him tower over the child even on his knees. "What's your name, son?" "Jason," the boy said, still clutching the flare with white knuckles. "Jason Mitchell." "Jason, where did the bad men take your sister?" "Back there." Jason pointed down a barely visible dirt road that branched off into the darkness. "At the old yellow barn with the broken windmill. They said they're moving her tonight. They said she's worth a lot of money because she's pretty and young." Doc, the club's medic who had saved countless lives in 3 tours in Iraq, was already examining Jason's feet with practiced hands. "These cuts are deep and fresh. This kid ran at least 2 miles barefoot to get here, maybe 3. "How did you know to use the flare?" Marcus asked gently, trying to keep the rage out of his voice. "My daddy taught me." Jason's voice cracked with emotion. "He said if I'm ever in real trouble, use the emergency kit in the car and stop good people for help. He said bikers look scary, but most are good guys who protect people." Jason's voice broke completely. "But Daddy's hurt real bad. They hit him with something heavy. There was so much blood." The temperature among the bikers dropped even further. These men had zero tolerance for anyone who hurt children. Several hands moved unconsciously toward concealed weapons. Knuckles cracked, jaws clenched. This was about to get very real, very fast. "How many bad men?" Razor asked, already in tactical mode from his Marine Corps days, his mind calculating approaches and strategies. 3 came to our camp," Jason said, his memory crystal clear despite his terror. "But they kept talking to someone on the phone. They said more people were coming with a truck. They wanted Mommy to come with them, but she fought hard, so they took Emma instead. She screamed so loud." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "She's only 8. Marcus made a decision that would either save lives or end them. In his mind, there was no choice at all. "Doc, take 5 guys and get to that camping spot. Find the parents and call 911. He turned to the others. "The rest of us check that barn. Quietly. No engines." Wait, Ghost said. He was their tech expert who had done intelligence work in the Navy, tracking terrorist cells through digital footprints. Kid, did these men say anything else? Anything about where they're taking her? Any names? Jason nodded frantically, his memory working overtime. They kept talking about a truck coming at 1 o'clock. Said Emma would bring good money across the border. They mentioned someone named Carlos who handles the pretty ones, and they said something about Phoenix. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Human trafficking, child trafficking, international kidnapping. The bikers exchanged dark looks that promised violence. They all knew what this meant. They had maybe 30 minutes before an 8-year-old girl disappeared forever into a nightmare no child should know exists. Marcus stood up, his decision crystallizing. Church vote, right now. In biker culture, church meant an immediate meeting for critical decisions. All in favor of handling this. Ourselves? 30 hands went up simultaneously. No hesitation, no debate. When it came to saving a child from traffickers, there was only one answer. The vote was unanimous. They would ride into hell itself for this little girl. Jason, Marcus said softly, you're the bravest kid I've ever met. Now I need you to be brave a little longer and show us exactly where this barn is. The boy nodded, still gripping the flare like a lifeline to safety. Beth, Tank's widow, who had been riding with them, stepped forward. She was a pediatric nurse who understood traumatized children. I'll stay with him, keep him safe. No, Jason said firmly, surprising everyone with his conviction. I'm going. Emma needs me. I'm her big brother. I promised I'd protect her when Daddy deployed. I failed once, not again. Marcus was about to argue when he saw something in the boy's eyes that he recognized from battlefields across the world. The same look he'd seen in soldiers who wouldn't leave their brothers behind. This 6-year-old had more courage than most grown men, forged in a moment of crisis that would break adults. Fine, Marcus decided after a long moment. But you ride with me and do exactly what I say, no exceptions. They moved like shadows down the dirt road, engines off, pushing their 500-pound bikes in neutral. 30 veterans trained in combat, now united in a mission more important than any they'd faced in war. Jason rode on Marcus's bike, wrapped in a leather jacket that smelled like motor oil, sweat, and determination. The jacket bore Tank's name. It seemed fitting that their fallen brother's memory would protect this brave child. The barn appeared through the cottonwood trees exactly where Jason had said. Old, wooden, probably abandoned for decades, except for the new padlock on the door and the fresh tire tracks in the mud. A single Coleman lantern glowed through a cracked window, and voices carried on the still air. 3 male voices arguing about money and the muffled, terrified crying of a child. Marcus held up 3 fingers, then pointed at different positions with military precision. The bikers spread out in perfect formation, surrounding the barn. These weren't just motorcycle enthusiasts, they were trained warriors who had cleared buildings in Fallujah and Kandahar. But this wasn't a foreign enemy. This was evil in their own backyard, threatening their own. Through a crack in the barn wall, Reaper got eyes on the situation using skills honed in force recon. He signaled back in military hand signals. 3 men, 1 girl tied up in the corner, weapons visible, 2 handguns, and what looked like a shotgun. The traffickers were getting nervous, checking their phones constantly, pacing like caged animals. Time was running out fast. That's when Jason did something that changed everything. Before anyone could stop him, he slipped off the bike and walked straight toward the barn's front door with purpose. "Emma!" he shouted with all his might. "I'm here. I brought help. I brought an army." The bikers froze in disbelief. This wasn't the plan. This was suicide. Marcus moved to grab him, but it was too late. The barn door burst open with a crash, and a man with a shotgun stepped out. He was tall, unshaven, wearing expensive clothes that didn't match the rural setting. He saw Jason first, then his eyes went wide as he noticed 30 bikers materializing from the shadows like demons from his worst nightmare. The trafficker's face went from confident to terrified in a heartbeat. He made a fatal error. He pointed the shotgun at Jason, the barrel wavering between the boy and the bikers. What happened next took exactly 3 seconds, but would be burned in everyone's memory forever. Razor, who had been a Marine sniper with 43 confirmed kills, threw his knife with perfect precision, sending the shotgun spinning harmlessly away into the darkness. Tank's best friend, Bull, all 300 pounds of him, hit the trafficker like a freight train at full speed. The man went down hard, his head bouncing off the packed dirt, and didn't get back up. The other two traffickers inside panicked at the sound of the impact. They ran for the back door, straight into the waiting arms of 20 very angry bikers who had surrounded every exit. The fight was over before it began. These men who terrorized children discovered what real fear felt like when faced with dozens of combat veterans who had nothing to lose and a child to save. Marcus kicked open the barn door with enough force to tear it off its hinges. Inside, he found Emma huddled in the corner, tied up with zip ties but physically unharmed. Her eyes were wide with terror until she saw Jason running toward her, stumbling over hay bales in his rush. "I told you I'd get help," Jason said, pulling out a small pocket knife to cut her restraints. "I used Daddy's emergency signal just like he taught us. These are the good guys." Emma collapsed into her little brother's arms, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. The sight of these two children holding each other in that dirty barn, surrounded by evidence of evil's intentions, broke something in every hardened biker present. Several turned away to wipe their eyes, not wanting others to see. Others didn't even try to hide their tears. But the night wasn't over. Ghost had been going through the traffickers' phones with his intelligence training, and what he found made his blood run cold. His face went pale as he scrolled through message after message. "Marcus, you need to see this. Right now." The phones contained an entire network. Photos of other children with prices attached, addresses throughout the Southwest, contact numbers with area codes from multiple countries. This wasn't a random kidnapping or a crime of opportunity. This was part of a major trafficking ring operating across 3 states with connections reaching into Mexico and beyond. And according to the encrypted messages, Ghost was rapidly decoding. 2 more children were being transported that very night to a handoff point. "Call it in," someone suggested. "Let the FBI handle it. By the time cops get here and process everything, those kids are gone forever," Ghost said, his fingers flying across the phone screens. "But I have the addresses, both within 50 miles. One's a motel off Route 66, the other's a warehouse in Riverside." Marcus faced the most difficult decision of his life. They'd already broken numerous laws. Going after the other children would mean full-scale war with a trafficking ring. But looking at Jason and Emma, seeing the trust in their eyes, the choice was already made. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the smallest heroes inspire the biggest rescues. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. "Split into 3 groups," Marcus commanded with the authority of a man who had led soldiers in combat. Doc's team gets these kids to their parents and handles the cops. 2 strike teams hit those addresses, full combat protocols. "We end this tonight." Jason tugged on Marcus's jacket, looking up with eyes too old for his age. "You're going to save the other kids too?" Marcus knelt down once more, placing a massive hand on the boy's small shoulder. "That's what good guys do, right?" The boy nodded solemnly. "My daddy says heroes are just regular people who don't walk away when someone needs help. Your daddy's a smart man, and he raised a hero for a son." What followed was the most coordinated vigilante operation the state had ever seen. 2 teams of bikers hit 2 different locations simultaneously, guided by Ghost's real-time intelligence from the traffickers' phones. They moved with military precision, using tactics learned in places where failure meant death. At the motel, they found a 10-year-old boy named David locked in a bathroom, guarded by 2 men who never saw the bikers coming. At the warehouse, they rescued a 7-year-old girl named Sophia, who had been kidnapped from her front yard just 6 hours earlier. Her guards made the mistake of reaching for weapons. They were subdued in seconds by men who had disarmed insurgents in much more dangerous conditions. They also captured 5 more traffickers and discovered something that made everything worthwhile: detailed records of the entire operation, names, dates, contacts, and most importantly, locations of 12 more missing children scattered across the network. By the time law enforcement arrived in force, they found 8 traffickers zip-tied with military precision and waiting for arrest. 4 rescued children being comforted by tough men who looked like killers but acted like guardian angels, and enough evidence to dismantle an entire trafficking network. The bikers had documented everything, creating an airtight case that would send these monsters to prison for life. Detective Sarah Chen, who arrived at the original barn with a full tactical team, surveyed the scene in amazement. She knew the Iron Wolves by reputation, tough guys who'd had their share of run-ins with the law over bar fights and noise complaints. But tonight, they had done what the entire justice system had failed to do for months. "You realize I should arrest all of you," she said to Marcus, though her heart wasn't in it. "Probably," Marcus agreed, still wearing Jason's blood on his jacket from carrying the boy. "But you won't." "And why's that?" Marcus pointed to Jason, who was sitting on a motorcycle, still wearing an oversized leather jacket surrounded by protective bikers while waiting for his parents. The boy was teaching Emma hand signals the bikers had shown him. "Because that 6-year-old kid did what we all should have done. He stood in the middle of the road and refused to let evil win. We just followed his lead." The detective's partner whispered urgently in her ear. The FBI had been tracking this trafficking ring for 2 years without a breakthrough. In one night, a little boy and 30 bikers had accomplished what federal agents couldn't. The evidence they had gathered would close dozens of cold cases. Doc's team had found Jason's parents at the campsite. His father, Daniel, had a severe concussion but would survive. His mother had fought so hard against the kidnappers that she'd broken one's nose before they'd decided to take Emma instead. The reunion at the hospital was emotional, beyond words, with parents holding children they thought they'd never see again. Daniel Mitchell was a former Army Ranger who had trained both his children in emergency procedures before his deployment. Through tears that he didn't try to hide, he shook every biker's hand. "I taught him to find good people in an emergency. He found the best." "Your boy saved more kids than just his sister," Marcus told him. "That flare he waved started something that's going to save dozens of children." But the story took one more incredible turn. 3 weeks later, at the Iron Wolves clubhouse, a special ceremony was taking place. Jason stood in front of 30 bikers wearing a custom-made child-sized leather vest that had been rush-ordered from the best leather worker in 3 states. On the back was a special patch designed just for him. "Young Wolf, Hero of Highway 49. Marcus presented him with a plaque that would hang permanently in their clubhouse, right next to the memorial for Tank and other fallen brothers. For Jason Mitchell, who reminded us that courage isn't about size or age. It's about standing up when standing up is all that matters. The FBI agent attending the ceremony, Special Agent Rodriguez, revealed something that stunned everyone. The trafficking ring Jason had helped expose was connected to 17 missing children cases across 5 states. Because of that night, all 17 children were found and returned to their families. Some had been missing for months, one had been gone for 2 years. This 6-year-old boy accomplished more in one night of bravery than our entire task force managed in years of investigation, Rodriguez announced. His willingness to stand in that road with a flare didn't just save his sister, it saved children he'll never meet in cities he'll never visit. Jason's simple act of desperation, standing on a dark highway with a flare, had created a chain reaction that destroyed an entire criminal enterprise. The emergency signal his father had taught him became a beacon that drew heroes out of the darkness and lit a path to justice. The Iron Wolves formally adopted Jason's family as their own. Every birthday, every Christmas, every school event, 30 leather-clad guardians would appear. Emma grew up knowing that no one would ever hurt her again because her little brother had found an army of protectors who would ride through hell for her. At her high school graduation, 30 motorcycles escorted her to the ceremony. Years later, when Jason turned 18, he faced a choice about his future. Scholarships had poured in from across the country. His story had opened doors at prestigious universities, law enforcement academies, and military programs. But he made a decision that surprised no one who knew him. He joined the Iron Wolves, becoming their youngest member ever. At his initiation ceremony, watched by his proud parents and sister, Marcus asked him the traditional question about why he chose this brotherhood. "When I was 6, Jason said, his voice now deep but carrying the same determination, "I learned that heroes wear leather and ride Harleys. They smell like motor oil and look scary, but they'll ride through hell to save a kid they've never met. That's the kind of man I want to be." The trafficking ring's trial made national news for months. 37 people were eventually convicted, including high-level organizers who thought they were untouchable. A new federal task force was created specifically to combat child trafficking. They named it Operation Red Flare, after the signal a brave boy used to stop evil in its tracks. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story happened 5 years after that night. The Iron Wolves started an annual tradition, the Highway 49 ride. Every year, hundreds of bikers from across the country gather to ride that same stretch of road. They carry red flares and raise money for organizations that fight child trafficking and support survivors. Last year, they raised $3 million. Jason, now a young man studying criminal justice while working as a motorcycle mechanic, leads the ride on his own Harley. Emma rides with him, wearing her own Iron Wolves jacket, studying to become a social worker specializing in trauma recovery. Their parents follow in a car, still amazed at how their son's courage that night changed not just their lives, but the lives of so many others. Detective Chen, now head of the state's anti-trafficking unit, speaks at the event every year. She tells the crowd the same thing. Evil counts on good people doing nothing. It counts on darkness and silence. But evil didn't count on Jason Mitchell. And it sure as hell didn't count on the Iron Wolves. The barn where Emma was held captive has been demolished by the Iron Wolves themselves. In its place stands a memorial garden with a bronze statue of a small boy holding a flare high above his head. Fresh flowers appear there daily, left by families who understand what one moment of courage can mean. The plaque reads, "Sometimes the smallest lights shine the brightest in the darkness. Jason Mitchell, age 6, hero of Highway 49. Jason still carries a red flare strapped to his bike, not because he needs it anymore, but as a reminder that one desperate act of courage can change everything. He teaches emergency preparedness to children now at schools across the state, always ending with the same lesson his father taught him. In your darkest moment, find the good people. They're out there, sometimes in places you'd never expect. Sometimes they wear suits, sometimes uniforms, and sometimes they wear leather and ride motorcycles. But they're there. The Iron Wolves clubhouse walls are covered with photos from children they've helped over the years. But in the center, in the place of highest honor, hangs that first picture of 6-year-old Jason standing on Highway 49, holding that red flare like a beacon of hope. Next to it hangs a photo of him at 18, wearing his Iron Wolves colors, standing in the same spot, holding the same type of flare. Because sometimes heroes don't wear capes, sometimes they wear dinosaur pajamas and have more courage than anyone has a right to expect from someone so small. And sometimes, when that kind of pure bravery calls out in the darkness, angels answer on motorcycles. Every parent who hears this story teaches their children the same thing. If you're ever in trouble, be like Jason. Stand up, signal for help, and trust that good people will come. Because they will. They always will. The good still outnumber the bad, and courage is contagious. The traffickers are all serving life sentences without parole. The children they stole are all home, some now adults themselves who speak at the annual ride. And somewhere tonight, Jason Mitchell rides with his brothers, knowing that when he was 6 years old and stood on that dark highway, he didn't just save his sister. He lit a fire that would burn through evil and light the way home for children he'd never meet. That's what real heroes do. They stand in the road with whatever light they have and refuse to let darkness win, even if they're only 6 years old, even if they're scared, even if all they have is a flare and a desperate hope that someone good will see their signal. Because someone always will. If you were inspired by Jason's incredible courage and the Iron Wolves' heroic response, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories. Click on one of the 2 stories on your screen right now. You won't believe what happens next.